we have thousands of stories talking about it. Sure. And we have documentaries, we have news stories, and that is Natalie here? Somebody here to turn that? I could show you a couple of things, and it has to be responded to.
Yeah, sure.
Let me see the articles, please, if you would, and turn the lights down. Turn the lights down, and just put this on. It's right behind you, Johan.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do. Who are you to tell us whether we can occupy land or not? We are going to occupy land. South Africa occupy land. That's who we are. Whatever I want to do, we can withdraw my membership from this useless parliament.
Yes, Honorable. Must never be scared to kill. A revolution demands that at some point there must be killing, because the killing is part of a revolutionary act. Shoot to kill Yamaza, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer, pa, 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 to kill Yamaza, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer.
The mayor of D-Day in PE is a white man. So these people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain because you have touched a white man. Not because Mashaba and Soli will not be touched. They will be touched, no one. But we are starting with this whiteness. We are cutting the throat of whiteness.
Shoot to kill Yamaza, kill the brewer, the farmer, kill the brewer, the farmer.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing Word. And today I'm joined by Jerm Warfare, a dear friend. He's a cartoonist and also a podcaster based in South Africa. And today's topic is South Africa. And I have to admit, I'm an ignorant person when it comes to the politics of South Africa. So who is a better person to explain what is going on there? And especially with the allegations that there is an ongoing white genocide there. And my intention is today to have a civilized conversation to know what's really the situation is in South Africa. I'm not here to debunk or to confirm the allegations, especially by Donald Trump, because I take whatever he says with a grain of salt, especially that he doesn't condemn whatever is happening in the Gaza Strip and he doesn't call it a genocide. But he has shed light about this very sensitive issue. And I have been reading about this case for quite a few years. Now we have the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. He's the 5th president of South Africa. He's the president of the ANC. And then we have another personality who is Julius Malema. He is the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, a communist political party. Jerm, first of all, thank you so much for coming to the show. It's a really pleasure to have you on Syriana Analysis. How do you see these allegations, first of all, by Trump himself? What's the reality of the matter of confiscating, let's say, the farms of the white, let's say, South Africans? And also the allegations of genocide. Those are serious allegations, serious accusations against South Africa. You're there. I believe that you've been investigating this case. So please share us your thoughts about this.
So firstly, Kevork, thanks for the invitation. It's so nice to be on your show. It's a very complicated issue. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just give a little bit of context because it gets very confusing very quickly. So South Africa, as most will know, has a very nuanced history. It's not, excuse the pun, black and white. So very, very quickly, European settlers arrived at the Western Cape Coast around 1652 and started settling. The reason why they were settling is because they were basically refueling ships that were on the way to the Middle East and sort of Far East India. It's part of the India. What's it called now? I've gone blank now. But they were the biggest company in the world. Anyway, it was the stop-off point. But what happened was they started farming because they needed food. It's a very long trip. And so you had this combination of Germans, Dutch, and French, which over a few generations of living here became known as the Boers. Boer is now pretty much an Afrikaans word, and with a capital B, it means a white farmer. With a lowercase b, it simply means farmer. And there's a strong ideology attached to the Dutch East India Company. That was the company I was trying to get to. So a Boer with an uppercase B is very, very important because it's attached to identity and ideology, right, and history. It's very, very, very meaningful. Then around the 1800s, you had the British arrived, and as we know, the British decided to try and take over what was being developed by the Boers, and you ended up with various wars. In particular, the first Anglo-Boer War, which the Boers won. But then the second Boer War is the big one, and it's one of the most significant wars of the 20th century. The British thought that they would defeat the Boers in about 2 months and be home for Christmas. It took about 2 years. They eventually defeated the Boers, but the Boers fought unbelievably. And it's one of the great stories of the 20th century, how the Boers, they were defeated, but they were still seen as winners in many ways because they held back the onslaught of the British for 2 years until they were just outnumbered and defeated. So then you had the Union of South Africa that was created in 1910, and that was effectively, in many ways, South Africa as we know it today. And then we had a lot of, or shall we say, race laws that were implemented to try and keep the various ethnicities this is important, not as slaves or oppressed, but apart, so that because they were saying at the time that communication was very difficult. The locals, there were no locals really in the bottom left of the country. There were locals coming down from the center towards the right-hand side of the country. They couldn't write. There was a lot of communication breakdown. So the whole point was to try and create separate sort of states, nation states, as it were, within this union, hence the term union. And eventually, as we know, apartheid came about, which was actually a British invention, not an Afrikaner invention. And then we had 1994, which was the introduction of, say, a democratic South Africa. Now, that's all important. That's all very, very important, because we need to also understand that there are effectively two types of white groups of people in South Africa. There are the Afrikaners, who basically come from the Boers. It's almost the same thing. And we have the Anglo South Africans, which would be the British the whites with British ancestry, and the Boers with the Dutch German sort of ancestry. I fall into the Anglo category. My wife, for example, falls into the Afrikaner Boer category. And so you have this division. This is important because I don't think Trump understands this exactly, which is why he only talks about Afrikaners as if all white South Africans are Afrikaners, which of course is not true. There are millions of Afrikaners and there are millions of Anglos. With that in mind, when Trump spoke to Cyril Ramaphosa, the South African president, it was embarrassing on multiple accounts. Firstly, Trump got a lot of things wrong, and I think that's simply because he doesn't understand the complexity of South Africa. And our own president pretended like he had no idea what was going on.
Yes.
Which in itself was embarrassing. Now, we can get into that shortly, and I'm sure we will. Now, the other part of your question was the genocide. Genocide is an extremely complicated term also, and it depends on how you define it. If you are talking about Gaza, it's very obvious that a genocide is occurring because there's intent, there's every category within the definition gets fulfilled. So Gaza 100% is a genocide, right? In South Africa, it's a lot more difficult to figure that out. It could technically be that there is a genocide, not of white South Africans, which Trump got wrong, because if I felt endangered, I would have emigrated. I would have taken my family and left. Right? I live here, and I don't feel like there's a genocide coming for me.
Yeah.
I haven't even experienced crime in years. But South Africa is a big country, and farmers are historically Afrikaners, and that's because of the history. I think maybe 90 to 95% of all farmers in South Africa, commercial farmers, are Afrikaners. Now, this is where it gets very complex, because if you're a farmer, you have a lot of land. And so now we have this dichotomy between land ownership and Afrikaners, and now suddenly it appears as if Afrikaners own most of the land, which of course is also not true, because you need to understand the actual geography of the land also. About half of South Africa is sort of desert, arid, which comes down from the Kalahari Desert section of which is near Namibia. That whole section comes right down on the left-hand side of the country. It's very difficult to farm, and the best you can do is have sheep and some crops that can handle that kind of condition. The right-hand side of the country is very, very green, and you can farm anything. So because you struggle to farm on the left-hand side effectively of the country, you need large tracts of land to produce anything of value. Say, for example, in the Netherlands, it's extremely luscious. You don't need big space. You can have very small farms which produce a lot. But it's much harder when you have very dry land.
Yes.
Okay, so with that in mind, is there a genocide of whites? No, I don't think of whites. Is there a genocide of Afrikaners? I'm not sure, because you could argue that the intent is there. You heard them singing songs about killing white farmers who are Afrikaners, but Afrikaners as a whole are not necessarily farmers, but a lot of them are. So that's why I said it gets complicated. I don't think Afrikaners per se are facing any type of physical genocide, but there certainly is intent to remove everything to do with Afrikaner history from South Africa. So could that be cultural genocide? I don't know. Now, with regards to a more specific question, is there a genocide of Afrikaner farmers? That's very complicated to answer. You could say yes, you could say no. The intent is there. You've got laws that give the state power to take away farmland without compensation. That was signed in January this year. So that's effectively theft. All right.
Some arguing in South Africa that this is about the era of the apartheid, when the Black Africans' farms were confiscated. Therefore, this is about justice. For example, one of our commentators say, my wife's family was forced to leave the land. They lived undue to the Boers. So some people may argue that.
Yes. Yeah. So that is true. And apartheid did do that, which is why I said it's complicated. What you must also understand is during apartheid, they had what was called homelands. And homelands were segregated sections of the country for effectively all the black Bantu tribes. But they were also on the best part of the country geographically, which is where all the rain and the luscious land is. Mostly the left-hand side. So there's a big section of South Africa known as the Karoo, Karoo. And it's largely desert, and it's a very big chunk of the country. It's very difficult to farm there. The best you can do is maybe have sheep and, as I said earlier, a few other things, but it's dry and it has a lot of issues with lack of rain, etc. The farms that were taken during apartheid is unfortunate, and it is something that occurred because they weren't perfect. The government of the time obviously had a system in place that was not sustainable and that wouldn't really have worked in the long run. But does that mean now that the reverse must happen? Because ultimately, the commercial farms that might have been taken during apartheid were very few and far between, firstly, number one. And number two, were probably very small farms. I don't think that they were commercial farms. I don't think they were selling to the greater country at large. They were probably homesteads. But nevertheless, let's come to that quickly. Since 1994, there have been attempts by the government to have reparations in that sense. So, for example, the government has attempted to buy, shall we say, let's be decent about it. They were trying to buy farms from white farmers to give to black farmers. The majority of black farmers that took those deals failed. Their farms didn't make it, and a number of them have had to resell back to the state. Some of them decided, well, I'm not going to take the land, I'm going to take the money instead, the worth, the value of that farm. That has been the overwhelming majority. So what had happened was a number of black families that were given land didn't actually want the land because it was too much work, I suppose, and it's very hard to be a farmer. So I'm not trying to say something bad, but I wouldn't want to be a farmer, and I know nothing about it. So if I was given a huge ground, it would fail. So they took the value instead, and this has been ongoing for the last 30 years, because it would also require moving from the city into the countryside, into the rural areas where the farms are. Now we have a situation where it's a political tool. It's a political tool. Land belongs to the whites. It's not true. The state owns the majority of overall land in South Africa. But of farmland, it is true that farmers own. But that goes without saying, because of the amount of land that's required to farm. So now you have politicians like Julius Malema, who you saw in the opening clip.
Yes.
He's now using "Kill the Boer," which is an apartheid struggle song, but he's using it now to drum up support. And it's very important to note that if you believe in freedom of speech, you would technically be okay with the singing of a song like this. I'm very uncomfortable with it, Kevork, because when you have a stadium of 100,000 people all singing and jumping up and down, going, "Kill the farmers, kill the Boer," which means the white farmer, and they're singing it and they're making sounds with machine guns, and then you know that the white farmers are severely targeted and have been targeted for the last 30 years. It's a very, very, very dark thought to have, that perhaps this is not a very good idea. And I'm also want to add, it's not the majority of black South Africans that support this.
Yeah.
It's a minority that's exceptionally vocal.
What's the popularity of Malema in South Africa?
So-
What's his situation in the parliament? Like, how much percentage support does he have from the African people? Is he part of the government? Those are important
He is part of the
things,
government.
because if we say there is an intent, and if he's part of the government, then there is a responsibility on the government. But if he's on the opposition side, that's a completely different story, right?
Well, he is in parliament, and his party is the third largest party in the government. However, his party has lost support in recent years, and they are, I think, below 10% of the total vote. So his party has less than 10% of the vote, but has the loudest voice, because they are very good at marketing, and they are excellent at playing sort of one-trick pony politics. That their only tool, their only trick that they use is basically kill the farmer, and they play into that sort of that, shall we say, classical communist rhetoric, where land is the most important thing, and in many ways it is. But singing songs about killing farmers is absolute intent. Now, let me also add something. White farmers who get killed is a regular occurrence. Every single week in South Africa, there's a white farmer who gets attacked, not necessarily killed, but attacked on his farm. And there have been tragic stories of white farmers who have been murdered, and the blood has been used to write on the wall saying "Kill the Boer." Okay, so that's quite scary.
What's the data that we have? Do we have a data about the number of Afrikaners who were killed by, let's say, due to such incitement against them?
It's very hard to know, because the South African government stopped collecting that data a number of years ago. They also disbanded what's called the Commandos. The Commandos was a farm protection unit that existed up until the early 2000s, and basically they were special task forces men who worked in say, the military, and they were allocated a region to look after, and they would work with the farmers as a type of protective unit. And they worked alongside the police and the military. All right, so they had the ability to make arrests and all that kind of thing. The South African government disbanded them in the early 2000s and said that we're going to hand over their role to the police. Now, the police are absolutely useless in South Africa, and so useless, in fact, that the private security is 4 to 5 times larger than the police in South Africa. So you have to now pay your taxes and pay fees for private security. And on top of that, you've got all sorts of NGOs and other groups trying to build community networks of protection for farmers. Let me give you an example. So my wife comes from basically a farm outside Pretoria, which is the capital of South Africa. It's up just outside Johannesburg. In the countryside, in the farmlands. Every single day, Monday to Sunday, all the farms in that region use two-way radios at 7:30 in the evening, and they call one another to see if they're all okay and safe. Every single day. And if something seems off, they will drive there and they'll go and see if everything's okay. So they have to create all these types of protective measures. They have to have electric fencing or some kind of solidified structures to keep themselves safe. They have to have all kinds of dogs as warning signs. They obviously have to have guns. I mean, this is how they live, and you have to wonder why. And it does appear now. Here's where it's going to get very interesting, Kevork. I'm talking a lot. Please interrupt if you feel you need to.
No, please.
But here's where it gets very, very interesting. I cannot prove this, but I do have a strong suspicion based from talking to various people over the years that this is not only domestic. I think that there are foreign interests involved in destabilizing the country, because I know that agriculture is one of the centers of our economy. And
Yes.
what better way to create control mechanisms than to create instability in the agricultural sector? Our mining sector is not sovereign. I think one of our biggest mines, and as you know, South Africa is big on minerals.
Yes.
One of our biggest mines is called Anglo-American. Do you think that any South African has ownership of our mines? No.
This is one of
Oppenheimer.
this is one of the agendas of Malema, right? Like he is calling for nationalizing the minerals and the economy of the country, basically.
Yes, he wants the mine. So this is interesting. So he wants the mines. Well, he claims he wants the mines to get taken by the state back into South African hands. I have no comment on that because I simply don't know the internal workings of the mines. Mining is obviously a big part of South Africa. It's what made us. It's what made us. You know, gold, platinum, diamonds, and that sort of thing. But I don't know if having a failed state like we have taking control of those mines will help us. I think it will send us spiraling downwards. Now, but can I read you something that Malema tweeted a number of years ago? Let me just find it here quickly. Listen to this. This is from Julius Malema, and it's still on his timeline if you go and search for it.
If you can send me through a private message, I think we can. I can also show it on the screen. I just send you a private message now.
Oh, okay. I don't. Okay. I'll let you talk, and then I'll search for it. I've got the screenshot in front of me, but I'll go and find it in a moment.
Yeah.
This is what he tweeted. Anti-Semitism is hatred, prejudice, or hostility towards Jews. Some of our biggest financial donors are Jewish, and we love them. That's the same guy you saw in the clip singing songs about killing Boers and farmers. Now that makes me think that he does have external funding and external agendas going on. But like I said, that is my speculation. On top of that, and this was very interesting when Cyril Ramaphosa met with Donald Trump. Most people missed a small bit of this conversation that he had, which got my red flags flying. He said, "We can't control our." Oh, you found it. Yeah, there it is.
Anti-Semitism is hatred, prejudice, or hostility toward Jews. Some of our biggest financial donors are Jewish, and we love them.
There you go. Okay,
It's a long time ago, like 2010.
Yeah, but it's the same guy. It's the same party. And that was when they were just forming, by the way. The party was just coming together around about that stage. What was I saying now? Oh, yes. So Cyril Ramaphosa says to Donald Trump in the White House, and it's there, you can go and watch it, but nobody seemed to pick up on it. He said, we can't control crime without technology. Now, that for me was a very unusual statement for him to make. He never speaks about technology. I don't think I've ever heard the president of South Africa talk about technology. And now he says we must solve crime with technology. And he's making references to drones and surveillance and all kinds of Agenda 2030 type ambitions and goals.
Yes.
I know for a fact that increased surveillance is also linked to Starlink, and Elon Musk was part of this idea to get Cyril Ramaphosa into the White House, because Starlink is not available in South Africa. It's available in our neighboring countries, but not in South Africa, because we've got some very racist laws that were blocking his company from opening here, and he just didn't want to comply. Rightly so.
What are the conditions for Elon to invest in South Africa?
Well, in order to launch Starlink in South Africa, his company would have to have a certain percentage of black ownership. So in other words, you want to open a big company here, you have to have X amount of black people who own the company. Like, let's say it's 50%. And he said, no, well, it's my company. Why must I just give 50% of it, or 49 or 48% of it, or whatever, to a group of black people?
This was similar law, by the way, in Syria. Like before the regime change, if a foreign company comes to invest in the country, what would they do? Basically, they say a certain percentage of the company should be operated by Syrians, not from the foreign investor, for example.
And I suspect that has okay, but hold on, there might be a difference. So, for example, Amazon opened in South Africa, but they employed South Africans. They didn't bring over Americans to work for the company. That's different, and that's understandable. That's fine. That's not what this law is about. This law is that the ownership of the company has to be removed from the actual owner. It makes no mention of who works for the company, which is that there is about inflating numbers of business ownership to try and make apartheid reparations look like they're working. It's more political than it is actually practical. In any event, doesn't matter what your view on that is, that came up, and I believe strongly that the reference to technology by the president is a direct reference to Elon Musk and Starlink and more surveillance, which I think is part of the control grid Agenda 2030 that's slowly rolling out all over the place. And I know for a fact also that our president is part of the World Economic Forum. He loves all those guys there, and he wears the little badge on his jacket. And he has effectively sold out South Africa. I mean, our climate change agenda, I read a white paper that showed that South Africa gave up something like 26% of its climate decision-making, macro decision-making, to the United Nations. All right, so that's a quarter. Already a quarter of our decision-making has now left our country, and we have to oblige. And that's why you end up with situations like solar and wind turbines and all that kind of thing. Anyway, so I think that there is a connection between Starlink and this conversation that occurred, theater, to some degree it was theater, what happened between Trump and Ramaphosa. There is also truth in it, and that's why the whole thing becomes so murky, because you have to sift, you got to sieve through it, with the filter. And you go, okay, well, that part is true. The fact that he pretended that there's no farm attacks, that part is disgusting. Every single person that I know personally knows somebody who's been attacked on a farm. And Afrikaner history is tightly connected to farming. And of course it's language. And that's another thing also, Kevork. This is for me quite sad. I don't want to see my people leave. I don't think that you can ever become a strong nation if you're scattered around the world.
Yeah.
And if you, like, let's look at the States. You've got the Amish, and I think the Amish are ahead of the curve in many ways, right? I think I don't know much about them, but they appear to be a wonderful group of people, a wonderful community. Now imagine you encourage them to disperse. You would end up with no Amish. And if you have Afrikaners leaving South Africa, and I'm okay, I suppose, with them leaving. I mean, people can choose how they want to move around, but there's a political undercurrent that's causing this diaspora, and those Afrikaners who will be immigrating or moving to the US won't be Afrikaners 2 generations from now. They will have assimilated into American culture. You want me to read a comment there?
No, somebody is saying that the whole thing was a theater. Ramaphosa is in bed with the global elite,
That's
sacrificing
correct.
the Black South Africans in particular.
And I want to horse you back to what I said earlier. What's going on in South Africa with the farm murders, which are very real. I think there've been about 3,000, more or less 3,000 in the last 30 years. Now that doesn't sound like very many. But you have to understand also that we only have around 32,000 commercial farmers in South Africa, and they sit amongst the most threatened occupations of any occupation. To be a farmer in South Africa is 4 times more dangerous than to be a police officer, and that's what all the data does show. So we have a crime rate, a homicide rate of around 40, I think, or 45 per 100,000. And if you just look at farming, the homicide rate is around 150 to 160 per 100,000. It's significantly higher than standard crime. So I do think that there is an agenda to destabilize, and I think that most of the agenda is probably internationally backed. I don't know who. It's hard to know. In the same way, like for example, our rhinos, I think are also targeted by international interests. They're not targeted by local interests. And I think that's a trend that we see around the world, don't you think, Kevork? You have international interests trying to destabilize countries.
Indeed. Brother, since you mentioned these WEF and also Elon Musk, there was a storm of comments here. And some people say, do you believe that Elon Musk is the antidote for Soros and WEF types of governance?
No.
Or he is the other side of the coin of this global elite, that he is representing, let's say, the quote-unquote conservative Soros, basically?
You see, this is the problem with the Trump administration, Kevork. I like Trump in some ways, and I dislike him in other ways. And I want to state for the record, I don't want to see America implode. I don't, because if America implodes, the rest of the world will follow suit. America is, like China, very, very important and very powerful. So I do want to see America succeed. Obviously, because
even China and Russia want the United States to succeed in one way or another, because there is a global network of a financial system and economies that if one of these powers crumble, they will also receive a big blow. So the difference is that in Russia or in China, they prefer cooperation with the US.
Correct.
And the US is trying to subjugate them.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just saying that in the big picture, I would like to see all of these big countries excel, prosper. Okay, so with that in mind, I think that Trump winning was a better win than Kamala for a number of reasons. However, why I think it was a dangerous win is because Trump is a populist, and he is an exceptionally good populist, and he can drum up support like I've never seen any other president do. And because of that, people buy into the personality cult. It becomes like a celebrity culture thing, right? So he can say anything, and people will kick the can down the road, and they'll say, "Okay, yes, that's good." So in other words, he'll launch Stargate, which is this big sort of surveillance control grid thing with mRNA vaccines, and suddenly you've got people who support Trump now suddenly agreeing with mRNA vaccines when a few years ago they were going against it. He can say, well, we're going to bring in digital ID, but we'll do it via the border. And so people go, well, okay, that's a good idea because we want stronger borders. So you get stronger borders, but you gently bring in digital ID. And so part of that Agenda 2030 control grid mechanism falls into place a lot easier with somebody like Trump and the people that he surrounded himself with, which means that people become more complacent. They become less awake, because under Biden, it was very obvious how stupid he was and how stupid the decisions were. Under Trump now, suddenly you go, well, he's brilliant, so he must know what he's doing. And it's what's the thing they say, 5D chess, and that sort of thing. And so the whole thing becomes more complicated because of him. So to answer your question now about Elon, so Elon, I think, he's obviously part of the system. He's obviously part of the system. You can't be where he is if you're not part of the system. But he does say things that are good, obviously, but he also does things that are not very good. Starlink, I am concerned about. It is the biggest surveillance system in existence. And so I think that you can get sucked into the appeal of Elon Musk very easily, because he does good things. I mean, X is demonstrably better than what it was when it was before he bought it. And I think Grok as AI engine is better than ChatGPT. So, excuse me. So you kind of have to you got to now apply a level of discernment that requires some thinking and some critical thought. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm trying to say that you got to approach these individuals with more discernment. You have to be more cautious. That's all. Because it doesn't mean everything that Trump says is wrong. Certainly not, or Elon for that matter.
I totally agree with you on this. This is something that more like some people tend to act or formulate opinions based on cultish, let's say, behaviors, and especially when it comes to famous personalities, politicians like Elon Musk and Trump. Like, if you hate Trump, then everything he says is wrong, and if you like Trump, then everything he says is correct. And that's not how I see things. However, I don't believe that Elon has our best interest at heart and in his heart. Like, this guy is a multi-billionaire guy, and for those who are concerned, they have to know that this type of people, after a certain amount of money, they care about control and authority over the money. So this is the nature of people, right? And I genuinely believe that he's trying to establish a parallel establishment in the US. So the old one is fading away and the new one is being formulated, probably more based on AI and based on data. And this is what Elon Musk is investing in on X, for example.
But also, Kevork, and this is something I didn't mention earlier, but I don't think Trump actually cares about white South Africans. Why? No. Why would he care about white South Africans?
So why did he brought this case? Because of Gaza, you think?
Yes, it could be because of the fact that South Africa took Israel to the international court. And if Trump really cared, because he said, we don't like, what did he say? We don't like seeing people being killed or whatever. Well, what about Gaza?
Mm-hmm. He said they're receiving horrific reports from South Africa. But isn't he receiving horrific reports from Gaza and from Palestine?
It's weird. Like, why does he suddenly care about us? And that's why I approach also with caution. And I'm not saying this is what you just said. It's not all bad or all good. It's nuanced. It is true that we've got a situation with white farmers being killed. And it's great that he's highlighted this. The whole world's talking about it, and that's a good thing, because the media has dismissed this for years and years and years. Let me tell you what happened. Here on a farm here, a farmer's wife was attacked in the house. She was tied to a chair, arms tied to the chair. They took a drill and they drilled into her hands, and then they used a blowtorch and they blowtorched her to death. After they shot her husband in front of her, and they stole nothing. They just wanted the crime.
Yeah.
Now that's you talk about that and people go, no, it's propaganda. It didn't happen, but it did happen. The crosses that Trump was showing, and this is where Trump botched it, because he got his information wrong. But those crosses do exist. I've seen them. They all over the country. There are these crosses with names on them of farmers that have been killed, white farmers that have been killed. They're not the graves, because that's what he said. They're not obviously nobody buries farmers right or anybody right next to each other like that. They're just memorials. They're there to remember, and they're there to remind you that the farmers who grow the food and provide the food for the country and export are being attacked. And it's a real thing, and it's a real problem.
Yeah.
And why it's happening, I don't know, because nobody wants to actually investigate the root. And the root is what I was hinting at earlier, that perhaps there are international interests. But I mean, it's difficult to get to that when nobody's actually admitting that there is this thing going on.
Yeah. Jerm, I promise you that we will do our live stream 40 minutes. You have responsibilities.
I can do another 5-10 minutes.
I will just show you a comment because some
sure.
people agree and disagree. So one of the commentators say more people die in America on average weekend from violence. It's terrible that any farmers were hurt, but 30 farmers a year is a light 2 weeks in Memphis and
No, but it's
Chicago.
not about that. It's not about numbers. You see, this is the thing. It's not about numbers. Okay, because if we're going to talk like that, then the actual numbers in Gaza are not that high in terms of world. But it's not. It doesn't work like that. It's not about numbers. It's about intent and severity, and it's about political discourse. When you're singing songs, nobody's singing songs about raping women. We're not. Politicians are not doing that. But they're singing songs about killing white farmers, and they're jumping up and down making sounds of machine guns, and then white farmers do get killed. Why are you singing a song about killing a white farmer? Oh well, it's just metaphorical. It's just a poem. But okay, then can we do that about, I don't know, about name something? Can we sing songs about raping kids? No, of course not, because it's just unethical. It's just immoral, and it's wrong, and it shouldn't be condoned, and it should absolutely be condemned by the president. And yet he just doesn't want to condemn it. He just condones it, actually.
By the way, you live in South Africa, and I just want to make a comment that you are in South Africa. It seems freer to express your opinion, especially critical opinion about your government, than someone like myself living here in Germany and being critical of the German government, whereas we are the land of the free here. No, I really appreciate it, because why I wanted to have you, I want to have a conversation, right? Like agree, disagree. People will always disagree and agree with especially sensitive topic like this. Some people are saying, for example, in the comments, if the Afrikaners don't like it, let them go back to their own countries. Others are saying like, you're completely correct, you're balanced on this. So I like this type of conversation. Yeah. I'm not here to, as I said at the beginning, to debunk or affirm anything. I myself, I've been reading about this for some time. Let's say I log into some websites to see what's happening in Africa, and I come across reports of killings against white farmers. But I really don't know why it is happening there. So having you on the show definitely clarifies many of these issues.
Yeah. I just want to say also, because you're popping up some comments on the screen. One comment that always comes up is that white South Africans must go back to Holland. That we hear that all the time, go back to Europe. I mean, I've been hearing that since I was, a teenager. And something else about, we live on stolen land. Those are two myths. Number one, white Europeans settled here in the 1600s. Okay, that was over 400 years ago. Over
just
400
like,
years ago.
when the Muslims came to Syria, right? The Islamic openings.
Is 400 years not enough time to become part of that country? Multiple generations. I have to apply to go to Europe, and I have to promise that I'm coming back to South Africa. That they don't want me in Europe for more than 3 months. I'm not allowed to stay longer. I'm not recognized as a European, and I'm not a European. My parents were born here. Their parents were born here. Their parents were born here. So after how many generations? I don't even sound. I know I can't hear my own accent, but I know that I have an accent, and my accent is not European. I speak a language that's okay. I speak English, but I can also speak Afrikaans. And Afrikaans is a language only spoken in South Africa. It's not Dutch. It's very different to Dutch. We can vaguely understand each other because so much time has passed. So the argument that I must go back somewhere is ridiculous. And then the other argument of stolen land, that comes down to the history of South Africa. You can only steal something that was owned, and only the sort of northeastern, the right-hand side of the country, parts of that had ownership. But most of the country, I mean, there was no country. I say country, but there was no country until around 1910. Most of it was not owned. There was no land. If it was owned, why did the Europeans not see anybody? They saw a handful of what's known as Bushmen, but they were nomads. They weren't settled. They didn't build anything. They were just running around, basically for food and moving around on the land like cattle do. There was no land ownership. In order to have land ownership, you need a civilization. You need to be able to write and create a contract. None of that stuff occurred. So it was open. But on the right-hand side of the country, where the Bantu tribes descended from Central Africa, that's a different story, and that has a different history. But South Africa as a whole is not equal. As I said, it's mostly desert. So large parts of the country just had nobody living on it. The argument of stolen land is very nuanced, and it's way too simplistic just to claim that the land was stolen.
I will ask you last question, Jerm, and this is related to Trump's and Musk's attempt to prop up and support political parties, let's say in Europe. For example, they are supporting right-wing populist groups in Europe, and for example, in Germany, the AfD, in Austria, FPO, in Hungary, in different places, they have allies, and they are unifying their rhetoric, talking points. It feels like Trump or his team, they are building a network of alliances throughout Europe. Do they have an ally in South Africa that they may or could prop up for upcoming elections, support them to replace the current government?
I don't know, because also South Africa is part of BRICS, and so that changes the dynamic slightly, although not that much. I think South Africa is focused first on building a stronger relationship with China. I think that's effectively what South Africa, and I think much of the world is doing that now. They can kind of see the trajectory of the future. But I think that our future is okay still for now, and I think South Africa is still well positioned in many ways. I mean, what you're not talking about is a very kind of it's an isolated story, as so to speak. I still live here, and I love living here, and by the way, I want to just again emphasize, race relations I think are by and large okay. They're fine. I don't encounter this type of conflict that you would think is going on. If you look at X, you would think that this is a war zone. It's not. I get on absolutely fine with all ethnicities and cultures. We go away often. I'm always traveling around the country, and everybody actually just gets on fine. But there is a black elite, and there's also a global elite, and there is obviously a percentage of people that will buy and follow, right? And so that makes everything more amplified and makes everything look worse. Now, I don't know what the political future of the country is in terms of who we're going to align ourselves with, but I would suspect that America is not high up on our list. Politically, and I think that's a terrible, terrible idea. And I would think that our country wants to align more with Iran and China and Russia and perhaps India. I'm not sure about Brazil, but I think the sort of, shall we say, the legacy communist bloc, which is what it appears to be. I don't know what that means for the future. I just know that geographically, I still feel quite good where we are. I think we're well positioned in South Africa. And I think that for now, Kevork, I would still recommend living in South Africa. I think it's a beautiful place. If it were terrible, I would have emigrated long ago. I don't think it's terrible.
And you wouldn't have recommended me to move in South Africa.
And I still recommend moving. Yeah, I still recommend South Africa because I think it's a beautiful country. And as I said, people actually, this is very important. If you leave people alone, they actually get on fine. If you just leave people alone. But when you have this constant interference from above the whole time, just prodding and poking, you flare up emotions and you flare up unnecessary conflict. If you just leave people alone, they get on fine. They figure things out, and that's why I still love living here. And I would strongly recommend that you come here, and anybody should come here because it's not that bad. We were in the Kruger National Park last month, which is, for me, one of the best places in the world. Was beautiful, absolutely incredible. And it's run. Funny enough, it's run by the South African government, and it's run fairly well. So my opinion still is my prognosis is still good. It's still positive, in spite of farm murders and what appears to be an intent to destabilize our agricultural sector.
Yeah. Guys, this is the website of Jerm. It's called jermwarfare.com. He says, we are in an information war. Join me in the trenches as we fight the good fight, one dangerous idea at a time. As you can see, his podcasts are broadcasted on Apple, Spotify, Overcast, Castbox, Pocket Cast, Podbean, and RSS. And you can find all the episodes and all the contacts and social media handlers are there. You can find the link in the description below. Just final note, by the way, Jeremy, I want to say, like, this is something I've been hosting many guests, but your voice is so radio-ish, so podcast-ish. It feels so comfortable in the ears, you know. I have to train myself also to have such a voice.
It's the microphone.
Yeah, I have the same microphone. Come on, we're
but bring it closer to your mouth, and you get more bass.
Okay, so I have to speak like I'm a podcaster now.
And then you talk into it like that. No, but listen, Kevork. Yeah, no, listen. You've also got the a radio voice, podcast voice. I love it.
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm going to invite you onto my show soon.
Absolutely. I will come to your show. You're going to do a new show. For those who don't know, do you want to declare it, or it's still a surprise?
No, I've done it for a month already. I'm on ukcolumn.org. I've got a daily show there. On top of my own stuff, and we chat about ideas. So it's not. This is very important. It's not about politics only. It's about all ideas, generally that are unconventional, or shall I say, fascinating or interesting, just to get you thinking about things.
Guys, I will go to his show as well, so you can also follow him on social media platforms, and we can have a different type of chat about different topics, whether it's about geopolitics, cybersecurity, etc. There are so many things that we could discuss with him. I learn from him. We learn from him. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, and this is the purpose of this channel. I'm not here to create an echo chamber. I'm not here to repeat myself and only host people who agree with me. Because sometimes I host people that I agree with him, and then people say, so he agrees with you, why did you host him? I host someone who disagree with, and then I host someone I disagree with him or slightly disagree with him, and the people in the chat, oh my god, this guy is not agreeing with him and he's giving a different opinion. Yeah, that's the purpose of this YouTube channel. So thank you so much, guys, really, for your appreciation that we host different types of guests on this channel. We're trying to do an independent work here, so if you like this show, you can hit the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel. I think we're 50 subscriptions away from hitting the 100K goal. And if you like to support this independent work, you can become a patron, or there are different other means in the description below. And I will see you tomorrow at the same time, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you, upon your families, and peace be upon you, Jerm. Salam.
Cheers.